Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Automobile sales in India witnessed its sharpest decline in nearly 20 years in July, dropping 18.71%, rendering almost 15,000 workers jobless over the past quarter. As per data released by the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, vehicle sale across categories including passenger vehicles and two-wheelers stood at 18.2 lakh units last month as against 22.4 lakh units in July 2018, down by nearly 19%. The previous biggest decline across overall domestic automobile sales was recorded in December 2000 when it fell 21.81%. Similarly, domestic PV sales also saw the biggest fall in nearly 19 years, slumping by 30.98% from July 2018 to 19. Previously, the worst decline was registered in December 2000 when wholesales had fallen 35.22%. The fall in PV sales in July was also the 9th consecutive month of decline. SIAM said passenger car sales in July were also worse since December 2000 when the segment had declined by 39.86%. Last month, domestic car sales were down 35.95% as against July 2018. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the cause of the auto sector woes and the way ahead. Joining me on the program today are Arun Malhotra, automobile expert and former MD, Nissan India; Vinkesh Gulati, Vice President, Federation of Automobile Dealers Association; and Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, Consulting Editor of the Business Standard. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Shubhamoy, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first try and analyze and understand what's causing this slump really as far as the auto sector is concerned.
Exactly, and it will probably not even call $1 million. You already said it's in $1 billion. That what is the reason why it's happening? Well, if there are three sets of factors which are causing it. One is global, one is domestic, and the other has got to do with macroeconomic other factors. Now let's look at environmental factors. The most interest, we have talked a lot about the domestic factors. Let's look at something which is not often talked about, which is the environmental factor. India has decided to go to BS6 by next April or June. Okay. This means that in India, diesel will essentially be out of anybody's use as a useful product to create a diesel car. Now, from a refinery when it takes in crude, there is no way that it can differentiate when it not produce diesel. About 45% of a refinery's production is essentially diesel. But this diesel, once the sulfur, it's made into the BS6 compliant thing, the cars which will be manufactured, the BS6 compliant cars, will be just having no difference in terms of pricing, and I think there Mr. Malhotra will come in big detail, with petrol driven cars. So today if somebody buys a BS4 car, that person is actually setting himself up for an absolute disaster. He's buying a piece of machinery which will not be serviced by the fuel that is coming along. He will have to upgrade, and if he doesn't upgrade, then he's sitting on a piece of junk which has got no resale value. And diesel cars in India was probably the largest selling percentage of the passenger vehicles. This is something that we have decided that as part of our environmental standards we shall move to. But this has huge cost as it is being filed now. A large part of the inventory of cars which is not being sold are the diesel cars. They just are no sellers for them. I mean, no buyers for them. And it's not surprising because anybody who goes there and wants to know is being told that this car will not be relevant. So why should people buy? So people will then have to buy a petrol car.
Right. And
petrol car typically comes costlier. And therefore, we are staring at a transition which is something like never happened before in India. Now, this therefore has to be understood that there is a significant cost to the economy which we have accepted. Is it something that we should have accepted? Well, we have said that as part of our environmental commitment, we shall be moving there. And if we are moving there, then this is actually a very major cost that we are seeing now. That is something that is one. The second part is this unique to India? No, it's not. This year, if I look at the figures, Daimler, Audi, everybody in Europe, if I look at their production figures, the slowdown is in every geography. Even in USA, it's only in July that the numbers have started coming up. So the automobile slowdown is a global phenomena. Right. It is not just restricted to India.
Right.
This is the context in which there are other factors which are playing out in India, which are the macro numbers, the slowdown in the domestic income and other factors which we do keep on discussing. But these are the two big elephant in the room which we need to understand, that it's a slowdown happening globally because of these changes and the environmental factors.
Absolutely. So let's take this point that Shubham has raised forward, Arun Malhotra, this issue of the environment. You know, how big an issue is it really? And secondly, of course, let's not forget, adding to the BS6 norms, of course, there is the EV vehicle push as well. So how much is that really playing on the minds of both the auto manufacturers and the customer at the end of the day?
See, if I look at there are various reasons. Internationally, there's no two opinion, there's been a slowdown. But if I take the Indian perspective now totally, the slowdown is happening more at the entry-level vehicles. And entry-level vehicles are basically petrol. There are 2-3 reasons for the slowdown. One is the ecosystem. If you look at our auto sales and if you analyze them, even in the last 2 years before, when the market was supposed to be good, Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, if you combine these 3 cities, they were declining or they were constant. The growth was coming from the small town India. It was coming from the Seekers, the Junjunus, the Dindigals and the Solans.
So the tier 2 and tier 3 cities basically.
You'll be surprised, 2 years back, Bihar had a growth of 42% when the growth was 10%. The ecosystem in the small towns, which was the biggest growth driver for automobile and especially for entry-level vehicles, has got disturbed. Now, you may call it, whether it's the farmer problem, farmer challenge, or the ecosystem because the transition of GST and demonetization, where the local entrepreneur, the local trader, the local shopkeeper is still finding his feet. That's one reason. Second part, look at what's happened in the last 1 year. In the beginning of September, when the festival season was about to start, we had the increase in hikes in insurance rates. We said we need 3 years of third-party insurance. Now that got to hike. In the last 6 months, there's been hikes or the cost hikes on account of safety norms being incorporated in the vehicle. I'm not doubting they are not required, they are required, but it adds to a cost. And on third, we may say today, even the small car, if you look at the taxation, it is 28%, but I say it is not 28% because a certain component of tax is still beyond the purview of the taxation. We still have a road tax, which is a state government subject, and it varies from 8 to 11%. So in a way, entry-level cars taxed at 38%, 28% of the GST, 10% of the state government, which competes with cigarettes and liquor. That's the other part. Then we are having, and state governments, since they want to get exchequer, they keep on raising the road tax. This used to be 6-7% of the vehicle. It doesn't come within the purview. So one side you have the cost structure going up, whether in insurance form, whether in clearly in the taxation form, and whether now there's an announcement that we might have increase in the registration charges. Now all this thing, and on top of it, your small town India, somehow the economy is disrupted. It may be temporary. I think if I have to look domestically and internationally, yes, there are reasons. Somehow the small towns which were leading the growth of India for the last 4 years, they have got diluted.
Right.
And that's a big reason for the entire market.
Sure.
So there is something which is happening clearly. On the other hand, we are taxed high, ecosystem is there. Then third side, we have all this talk of shared vehicles which coming in, which is causing an impact, but in the bigger cities.
Right. So and it's a multitude of problems.
And fourth is the confusion which is there on BS6. What will happen? And fifth, the confusion on EV. When it will come, what it will come. So you have all the confusions and chaos. You have the higher taxation and you have the ecosystem which is disturbed. So that makes for a deadly cocktail.
Okay.
And that's causing the...
Okay, taking the discussion forward now, both the guests talking about it being either temporary or a transitionary period really as far as this particular slump is concerned. Vinkesh Gulati, do you think that this is a transitionary period or is it something that is here to stay?
Actually, as of now, we are expecting this to be a temporary phase. But the auto industry to bounce back again, it's a long phase. I feel it will take another year or two for the auto industry to have the glory days back. The festive season is just round the corner, and we have had a good monsoon. So I'm expecting some benefit, some triggers will happen in rural, and like Arunji said that for the past 10 years or so, the trigger was actually coming from rural, which is tier 2 and tier 3 town. So with a good monsoon, I am expecting the rural industry, rural sales to again come back, and it will give the needed trigger as of now. So and again, SIAM figures have come from July. August, I am again expecting a degrowth to happen, but September onwards, the dealers are expecting a bit of redressal in the degrowth what is happening today.
Okay, all right. So all three guests alluding to the fact that this could be a transitionary period and we could see brighter days in the near future. That's a good thing. Taking the discussion forward now, Shubhama, let's not forget that until a few years ago, the health of the economy was decided based on what's happening in the auto sector. Now, because of services and other things, of course, it does not remain the only component, but it has a cascading effect as far as the ancillary sector is concerned, doesn't it? And how it impacts them as a whole.
Massively. In fact, I mean, I'll be the last one to disagree that that the automobile sector doesn't impact the economy big time. Even now, for the manufacturing sector, 50% of the manufacturing sector that we talked about in India is the automobile sector. Also, the automobile sector has got, the reason why I'm bringing on the environmental factor is that that is something that is at the back of every buyer's mind. Indian buyer always looks at a car when she is buying it, just like when you buy a house, iska resale to hoga? And that is the question which no dealer is able today to give a very good answer.
Right.
There is to be you go to these major centers of these, used cars, and you won't get that in Delhi, but you go to these mid-towns places and you find piles. Those places have run out of space long time ago because the cars are not getting sold. This is something that does. India is not a very rich country. So per capita income, it's a lot of investment for a family when they buy a car. And they would want to see that car at the end of it, they can't just simply say scrap it and throw it away. They want the car to be sold, which is why we've got so much of white cars. Now, all of these factors are very important in elements to determine why a car gets sold in India. The point about automobile sector is also that automobile sector along any lanes finds distributed employment. The players, the boys who are working as the roadside shops, the amount of employment that they get created because of these cars is humongous. I'm not saying that they've gone out of job, but the very fact that this automobile sector could be prolonged, or the fact that we are moving to some other type of cars which are more sophisticated, means less space for them, less number of cars coming in. So the employment impact is actually substantial. I'm not sure whether we have actually even come to the deepest end of the curve as far as that employment is concerned, which is the supportive employment for the automobile sector. But it's huge.
But the impact it has on steel, impact it has on glass,
that is
impact it has on rubber.
It has on immediate. That is immediate. That you already see that companies, steel, as you said, and everybody down the line is already feeding it. I'm even concerned that if this is going to be when the car comes out of the showroom and 8 years, 10 years of a car's life, then the car starts being picked up by the roadside vendors, and they're a very important part of an urban economy. There's a huge employment issue there, and those guys will not be getting it. So there's actually a challenge that's coming up. So this technological upgrade that's happening, again, as I said, it's something we have taken on, but it's something that has to be answered. The reason why I don't take on there is the impact of demonetization. Sure, what it did is demonetization, GST. One of the things it did is it took away what is called the froth from the economy, the unaccounted cash. In India, we are now gradually coming to realize, and now there are literature coming up, which is actually accepting the fact that India did need a bit of that black economy. And this is a substantially different position from what we had earlier, that economy did spur a lot of investment, a lot of growth of consumption. And that economy, having been taken out, does create a problem in terms of people being able to, afford that second car, or whether to go in for the car, and whether to, for the people who are running enterprises where the distinction between your own income and the company's income wasn't that clear. These are substantially millions in India, and those millions are actually not appearing at the car dealer's room now, and that is where the risks are, that is where the numbers are therefore looking so absurdly bad.
Sure.
So these combination of circumstances, that a structural transformation is taking place in the economy, has created these changes. To say whether this would lead to a bright picture later on, yes, certainly. I mean, after all, the changes that are taking on are definitely meant for the good, and that will definitely
better environment,
better environment. There's a lot of cascading
better future
impact
for our future generations.
Absolutely,
and so on and so forth.
those sort of things are very well taken. But there is a cost and a pain that is coming from the deleveraging, as I might say, of the automobile production structure.
Right.
Remember I mean, and so there are lots of ways of looking at it, and we are just getting to round to analyze it.
Absolutely, no pain, no gain is an adage that I'd like to use. But Arun Malhotra, it's not all bad really as far as the auto sector is concerned, because if you look at the bookings as far as Hyundai's new car is concerned, there's a huge waiting period for that. MG is doing well as far as its vehicle is concerned, big waiting period for that car as well. So why is it that these guys are doing relatively better than the others?
So I won't call it a totally gloom and doom scenario, because there were reasons for it, and we believe, as Venkesh mentioned, with the monsoon setting in and slightly the festive season around the corner, it's better. But I just like to say one thing. When you talk of these two models, Hyundai or MG Motors, these are at that 9 lakh, 10 lakh level. Even when they get good bookings, they sell what, 3,000, 4,000. That is not going to make a difference in the volume of the market. The volume of the market is still at the sub 4 meter or the entry level between 2.5 lakh to 6 lakhs. And then what happens at an 8 to 10 lakh price point, customer loyalties, they keep shifting. So one model gain is not a totally incremental gain. It's a gain 30% incremental, 70% due to some other existing model already in the market. So it will not change the dynamics. Yes, it improves the sentiments. Yes, there are customers who are looking around. The bigger problem I see today is because 80% of our vehicles or 85% are financed. And there would be today at the entry level cars, whether they're financed by the nationalized banks or the private banks or the NBFCs, liquidity may be there in the system. But today banks have become, I would say, extra cautious with the high power magnifying glass to look at documents and criteria. And that is causing to high rejection also. So also there is a need, and I think the finance minister said it, to kickstart this finance movement. If you become, in this scenario, when various factors are working negatively, if you become overcautious, and unlike anything else, retail financing or financing an asset, it is distributed over lakhs of people. It is not risky. I still remember the 2008 subprime crisis, October to December, which was followed by the 26/11 incident in Mumbai. A lot of focus was given on kick-starting finance, started with the nationalized banks, which was taken up by Think. That can really make the difference.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about what to expect and how to get out of this slump really going forward. Venkesh Gulati, is there a special package that is required as far as the auto sector is concerned? Maybe some easing of norms really going forward. Is that going to help? What's going to help the auto sector?
See, actually, as per our finance minister's meeting, we had put this point very, very strongly that the liquidity has actually improved, but the effect of that liquidity to the market is not there. So the retail funding which was happening before with the aggression of NBFCs and even banks, those are actually missing in the field. So obviously finance is now what 90% plus for a passenger vehicle. For a two-wheeler, it's around 60-65% plus. So if the finance or the aggression in the finance is missing, it will affect the retail numbers. The inquiries go down, and you will see the NBFCs are the front runners if you want to have a better retail. During the festive seasons, they used to do all those of activities, launching 0% scheme, maximum finance scheme. Whereas as of today, there is nothing. Those schemes used to initiate the interest of the customer, and it always gave us good inquiries which were converted during all the festive seasons or marriage season or whatever the time may be. So we are expecting with all those financial support what finance minister has already assured, and even if you've seen the RBI policy which came was a very positive to the market, and SBI has come up with some interest rate reduction, but still we are still to find the aggressiveness in the market. So if the financial liquidity to the end customer, which is not very I can say those who don't have a very good CIBIL, or they don't have very good ITRs like rural private employees, rural customers having 1 bigha or 2 bigha of land who do contract jobs also. So for them the finance is still a call, and we are expecting with the meetings and whatever interactions we are having with the banks separately, like FADA has met SBI, we are in a process to meet ICICI also. So with all that, we are expecting that the things will improve in the ground, and once the banks become aggressive, so at least the uptick of 5 to 10% would easily come. So we are working on that, and I am expecting that, and as I have already told you, so festive season is actually 30-35% of the annual sale for any of the automobile dealerships. Okay. So this is the time which is coming. We all at FADA and the dealership are working hard to anyhow get the customers back at our showroom and convert them, so that the year-long degrowth what we are seeing, at least it stopped, or we can see an upturn in a growth for the coming time.
So you're hoping with the monsoons receding that the rainy days for the auto sector also will be over. That's a good thing. Shubhamoy, what's the best way forward really? You know, what needs to be done in the short term as far as the auto sector is concerned?
Short term, there's no doubt. I mean, what Venkesh is saying, what Mr. Malhotra is saying is absolutely right. Liquidity. If the banks and others, if they look at details, there would be a problem. Automobile sales and other sales have to depend on a bit of forbearance. So if they are willing to do that, then the sales would pick up. There's no magic wand to do it something else. NBFCs used to do it. Now the banks have to stand in for them.
Okay. And what needs to be done in the long term as far as the auto sector is concerned?
Long term, there's no point saying that these worries will go off immediately. The path is that if in all the sectors, if purchase savings rate is going to rise, if incomes rise, then the purchasing power comes back, and for that to come back, essentially the changes in terms of raising what I've been saying, that the exports and other sectors of economy, those sort of changes, reforms and factors which are the hard work, those need to be done. Those will not be something which can be done immediately.
So there's no quick fix really as far as this issue is concerned.
Quick fix is the liquidity. That's immediate to get people back immediately. But for the long term, or rather medium term or long term, whichever way you look at it, it'll have to be, you know, the working on the economic plumbing. Because there's lots of parts that have actually been changed. Every capital measurement, insurance. I mean, everybody has decided that the automobile sector is something on which we need to be looking at. So if somebody has been looking at, then obviously the automobile sector was bound to take a brunt of it.
Okay, all right. Arun Malhotra, what's the best way forward?
So best one, clearly liquidity, but liquidity converted into aggressiveness or willingness to finance. That's the first thing. Liquidity is still there in the system. If you have a good score, there's no problem in getting financing. That's the first step. The second step, I think, at least in two-wheelers and entry-level cars, or above a certain point, you need to reduce the GST, even if for a temporary time. It's been done in the past. It sets a new precedence. It sets a new, way of looking at business, and the change can come on that thing. So a short-term measure, the decrease in GST or rates also has to be looked into, because they are very high. And if the government can influence the state governments also. State governments have really, if you go through the last 6-7 years, which is not captured in the media too much, the way they have raised road tax is not funny. So we need to also have a limit on that. So, you know, when the price goes up, slightly down, and then you have financing, and then the festival season, and there is, I believe, in automobile, one thing to be speaking positively. Whenever I've seen the past, there has been a downturn. I hope I'm right in this time. Generally, automobile sales, they don't get, I mean, I'm totally finished off like FMG products, but there is some suppressed demand or pent-up demand which has got postponed. If we can get that back, and if you have these levers, part of it. Long term, as my friend mentioned, no short-term measures, but clearly all the costs which are to be added, whether it was insurance, whether it was safety, whether it's going to be BS6, all has to be, I mean, I think it's behind us, and we need a more stable regime. And there was a Prime Minister's statement just 3 days back that our market is large enough to have the ecosystem where we have IC engines also and electric vehicles. Both can learn, co-create and also exist together. I think that's the right way to do.
Okay, all right. And Vinkesh Gulati, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
See, very frankly, we at FADA are positive about the short-term demand for the coming. We are expecting the next October to be a good month for us. On the long term, I am not very hopeful as of now because BS6 is coming. Like our co-panelist said, diesel is a big problem, but diesel will be there. Whatever after BS6, even the pollutants or the norms for the diesel is good for the environment, and it will be always there. And there are companies like Mahindra has already got an approval for BS6 compliant Bolero. So there will be, market will be there. For all the UV segment, diesel is still to be there. And further, whatever we expect is once the BS6 is launched, it will take another 2-3 months, means April to July, to stabilize that price and the BS6 expectations. Because even the efficiency in a normal BS4 vehicle and a BS6 vehicle, leave apart the environment thing, on the vehicle also has to change. And once it changes, it's how the customer take it. And in India, normally these things are not accepted overnight. It takes 3 to 4 months from a customer side of view. So once that stabilizes, yes, auto industry is here to stay. The dealership will always be selling vehicle and have good numbers. So maybe short-term benefit, we are seeing 2 months coming good, and after July, August, you may see the auto industry coming back again.
Okay, all right then. On that note, I'd like to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that this slump that we see as far as the auto sector is concerned is temporary and probably transitionary in nature, and it all could change come the festive period. In terms of short-term measures, what needs to be done is we need to bring in more liquidation into the market and also some kind of tax relief as far as the auto sector is concerned, so that it can bring about an immediate impetus to auto sales. As far as the long-term measures are concerned, it's a completely different ball game altogether. A holistic approach needs to be undertaken so that we can see the economy kickstart and then take the auto sector along with it as well. That's it from me. See you again next time.